All right, we are live. So, all right, guys, welcome to the stock market presentation tonight. We are going to be talking about financial goal planning. So, not in all things stock market, but actually specifically financial goal planning. This is a very important topic that people fail to consider, but it's imperative that your future is dependent on this. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do the slideshow from start. Let me take this off real fast, guys. I apologize. This after thing is the reason every time I share my screen, it like automatically goes forward. So I want to turn these off real fast. I could probably apply to all, to be honest, but let's see if that worked. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay, so a little introduction on myself. I typically don't do this, but I saw Sean do it a lot, so I figured new faces around here, it'd be nice to kind of give you guys a background on myself outside of just the investing side of things. So there's a picture of myself with my two dogs. Nico is the face of BudgetDog, or was the face of BudgetDog when I first started. The big one in the back. He is he's about 4 years old now, sitting right in front of me. Watching TV. He's a shepherd mix, and then we got little Charlie. This is his little sister. She is a Pomeranian Chihuahua, and she's the rascal of the family. So no kids at the moment. One on the way. I'm a husband and soon to be father. She is due September 8th, so we have a little girl on the way. I'm the oldest of four boys. My favorite sports team is Cleveland. I rock LeBron James, Baker Mayfield, all the Cleveland teams, Browns, Indians, Cavs. I am a CPA by day, so I'm a certified public accountant. I specialize in the audit practice. So some of you guys have probably been on some of my calls before where I talked about like the 10K specifically and showed you exactly what I do for a living, helped you out with some stock market stuff with that. We paid off $76,000 of debt in 1 year, which is a huge accomplishment for us back in 2018. We are on pace this year, specifically, if any of you guys follow me, to pay off the entire mortgage in about 5.5 years. So we are, very in tune with our budget, and we are focused on getting that mortgage gone, ideally before she gets here in September. But there's a chance it's not till the end of the year. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm also the author of Investing 101 ebook, Everything the Investor Needs to Know. And that is a big seller. It's probably my biggest seller at the moment. So that's also in provider resources. That's a little background on myself. And I want to give you guys the opportunity to tell you a little bit about my upcoming course. So some of you guys might know about this, Budget to Financial Freedom. This is going to be an online Thinkific course. Really cool platform. Really excited for it. The launch date's going to be June 10th. So I've been kind of doing some chatter about it throughout my social medias. Pre-orders are going to be June 5th through June 9th, and that's going to be at 30% off. So if you guys get in, I'm going to send out the links starting June 5th. That's going to be available for 30% off. The price would be $69.99, but with the 30% off, it's only going to be $49.99. You'll have lifetime access to the course, any future modules added. You will have access to the community as well. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff in there, specifically to budgeting. And I'm also going to be doing investment awards, which is a really cool piece of this. So I'm taking proceeds from the course and giving it back to you guys, 10% to charity in general, or you guys through investment awards. So based on, let's say the course brought in 10,000, I would be giving $1,000 away back to the people that purchased the course in the form of an investment award for you guys to further your investment journeys, open an account for your kid, whatever that is. I'm going to be giving it back to you guys. So there's an application obviously within there. So to apply for that once you guys get in there, but that's a little heads up on the upcoming course. So let's get started into the financial goal 6-step process. So we have little Lily over here, little frog on a lily pad, and she's going to walk through the steps that we typically are going to take when we actually figure out, hey, what are our financial goals? What are we going to be focused on long-term? Everyone's talking about investing here, investing there. Let's take a step back and see what we're actually going for. The very first question, if you ever have done a one-on-one with me, I will say, what are your goals? Because that's where it all starts. So if somebody's just investing to invest, they might be using the wrong account unless they know which actual platform, which account, how much, all that kind of stuff plays into that. So that's the first question I'm going to ask. So this is the step one. So she's going to list out her financial goals on paper, very clearly, high level. Examples here are retire early, kids college paid for, etc. So what are you actually aiming for? Then we're going to go into the other steps that are going to kind of narrow down which path we're going to take based on our goals. Because most people just have a brokerage account. They might hop into investing and they might think, I guess it's a brokerage account. They don't even know it's really technically a taxable brokerage account. They're just opening a general account essentially through TD Ameritrade or E-Trade or Vanguard or something like that. And the goal is really, what are we actually using this account for? What's the best account to use based on our situation, all that kind of stuff. For example, if you wanted to retire early, yeah, sure, the brokerage account would make a lot of sense. But if you were like, hey, I have no goal to retire early, I want to really fund my kids' college. Well, funding your kids' college through a brokerage account wouldn't make the most sense. It would be, more so a 529, an ESA, education savings account. Other accounts are out there. Same thing for retiring, 401ks, IRAs, specific accounts made for that, in particular goal. So step two kind of gets into that. So which accounts do I need to use in order to fund my financial goal? So she jumped to the second lily pad, and this is where she's thinking in depth. Okay, I want, let's say I have 3 separate goals here. My first goal is to retire, just regular, like a 59 and a half or 62, whatever age you're going to retire. Let's use a Roth IRA for this. Let's use a 401k for this. Then maybe a second goal is let's fund my kids' college. Like I said earlier, a 529 would be, a great vehicle for that. Then the third goal might be, I want to have health. I want to have, ample savings for health considerations and benefits down the road. I need, a large pot in this health savings account. So I have a high deductible health plan. Therefore, I have a health savings account. I'm going to invest money into this HSA, as you guys probably know it, and make sure my health costs are covered in the future. Because I think the average person is expected to spend about $350,000 after the age of 65 on health in total. So that's a big consideration a lot of people kind of forget about, is their own health. And that's a really big one. So now in step 2, we're figuring out which account aligns with our specific goal. So this is kind of what we were just kind of talking about. So, investing for retirement, you might use a 401k. Some of you guys might have a 403b or 457, or even a TSP if you are in like the military or something like that for the TSP. But they're all kind of the same. They're investing for retirement. If you're investing for health, you want to do an HSA, the health savings account. And lastly, if you're investing for short-term goals or early retirement, taxable brokerage account is always the way to go. This would be for anything greater than, I typically say, 5 years. If you have a house down payment that you're trying to save up in the next 5 to 10 years, I would put it in this taxable brokerage account and invest that money. Other things, any goal less than 5 years, I would typically say just go ahead and put that into a high yield savings account or a simple savings account, money market or something like that, where it's not actually truly invested, because the market's too volatile in a 5-year span. So those are kind of the accounts that you'd be investing in and based on the goals here. And there could be other goals, and we can talk about which other accounts might fit your specific goals in the Q&A session. So step 3, now we're going to look at what date do I actually need to achieve this financial goal. So just blindly opening an account with, let's say you want to retire, but what age do you want to retire? Some people want to retire at 50, early retirement, and some people want to retire at 65 and they're totally fine with working 40 years, getting a typical 401k plan and retiring then. So what is the actual date? Think back to the 529 example. Let's say you have a child that's going to go to school. If they are 8 years old, you have 10 years essentially, right? So you have in 10 years, they're going to be 18 years old, going off to school, trade school, whatever they're going to. And you just got to be aware of the date, because we're going to back into the number that we actually need to invest for this specific account for this specific goal. So it's very targeted towards the specific, goal, which was step 1 essentially. And we'll work in, and I'll show you guys exactly how to back into these numbers and how I work with my clients really when I figure out how much they need to invest in what account at what time over what period, all that kind of stuff. Because this is confusing stuff. So that's step 3. Step 4, how much money do I need to actually put in this account at that specific date or for that specific date more so? So if you target, let's say you have a goal to early retire at 50 years old, you're 30 years old, so you have a 20-year time horizon. How do I know? I know my goal, I know how much, I know when I'm going to actually hit that early retirement or my goal is for that. Now, how much do I put in per month or per year, or how do I even know how many times I put it in, monthly basis, weekly basis, annual basis? So typically what I'm going to say is a monthly basis is your best bet. So contributing on a monthly or bi-weekly is your best bet. Dollar cost averaging, keeping it very simple, keeping the same amount going into the same account every single 2 weeks or every single month is how we're going to do this. And so this is a really cool, a big piece of the steps. So step 5 is how much do I need to begin investing to reach that financial goal at that specific date? So let's say you're 30 and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to get started. I know everything. I've set everything up. Let's actually figure out a number to put away based on our budget that allows us to reach our goal at that specific date. There's going to be assumptions that come into play here. So you can't just say, I'm automatically going to earn a specific percentage of return. So typically what you want to do here is be very conservative, because if you overestimate and, you're not really achieving those goals, like let's say you estimate for 10%, because that's the historic market average. Going forward, there's no telling. So to be on the safe side, it might make sense to do an 8% return, just so that it's more important that you're investing a lot more. And then if you hit that 10%, you're going to go way past your goal. But chances are you definitely get 8%. So using a conservative number ensures that you actually reach that financial goal at that specific date. So here are 2 websites, and I'm going to try to put these in the Wealth Squad when I'm done with this presentation, like attach it to the bottom, so that you guys can use these 2 tools. So I'm going to open both of these and walk you through a really cool tool I love. So this is for college savings in particular through Vanguard. So we're going to walk through exactly how we actually generate a number per month, based on, what we're trying to achieve here. So let's just make the assumption, what I'm going to put out a name here, Ellie, I guess, or Allie or whatever. Okay. So Allie is going to be, she is, let's say 5 years old, right? She's starting college in 18 years. As you see, all this stuff's updating as I'm walking through this process and updating this. So she's 5 years old, very simple input kind of stuff here. Years attending college, let's assume 4. Of course, they could be going to grad school or maybe just 2-year bachelor or associate degree. It depends, but let's just say 4 in this example. This is a very big assumption right here. So current annual college costs. So a lot of people don't know that. So what they do is automatically input for you a public 4-year school in-state tuition, the average. Or what you could do is click this little drop down, and you guys can actually walk through. Here's a public 2-year school. You can search your state. You can search the name of the school. You can check tuition and fees or include room and board. Obviously, I would probably include room and board, but everybody is in a different situation here. So this is important to know, before you even get to this process. Talk with your spouse, think about it through yourself. Let's say you're, saving for a child and saying, in general, I want to save 50% for them, or I want to save 100%. Understand that before you get to this piece, because the inputs will be easy after that, but figuring out, what percentage of college you actually want to give to them. Some parents are like, hey, I want my kids to work for it. Some parents are like, I'm going to give them 100% no matter what. It just depends on your situation. Not saying anything's right or wrong, but think through that as a percentage of what you kind of want to do. But then you can select, let's say some parents put restrictions. They might say, hey, you're going to go to a public in-state school because that's the cheapest route. As you can see, the price here, $22,000 versus an out-of-state public 4 years, $38,000 per year. So that can be, I know for a fact, personally, I will make sure that there's an in-state school out unless there's a scholarship involved, but I'm not letting my daughter go to like Clemson or way out of state and rack up $300,000 of debt just because she wants to go party at Clemson. That's not the goal here. But that's just my personal preference. You guys obviously can come to that conclusion yourself. So hit okay. So that's going to calculate that cost for you. Now you can kind of put in a planned contribution, but my goal is to kind of back into this number essentially, right? So you can look at your current savings. If you're starting this today, it's obviously going to be 0. This is a big piece right here, expected average rate of return. I would typically, it depends on your goal. So if you are in the type of funds that I recommend, if you guys read my book, Investing 101, or you've talked with me or in Wealth Squad at all, you will know I'm a low cost index fund investor or ETFs. Typically, I'm broad market as well. So if that's the case, it's going to be, let's say 8% to be even. But if you want to go super conservative, 6% is not a big deal. Obviously, they put that as a default option here because a lot of parents are in what they call a target date index fund. So it kind of balances your risk for you along the way. And it's pretty modest return of 6%. But if you do kind of what I do, let's say a VT SAX, a total market stock market index, I feel very confident putting 8. To be honest, I think you will get 10, but I would not estimate based on 10. So to be conservative, let's put 8. Here's that percentage of cost that you plan to cover. So we talked about, that's a conversation for you and your spouse or yourself, if you're a single parent, to figure this out. Do you want to cover 100%? As you can see, this chart's drastically changing. But let's say we want to do 50%, right? And then the rate of annual cost increase, this is standard input. This is based on historicals and what they expect to happen. I would keep that the same. Now we can figure out how much we actually want to contribute. So we can go back here, and this is how we actually back into our specific number. So for a planned contribution, we can see right now, if we put $100 on a monthly basis here, this is what we're going to have. So these little colored, this legend up here is saying, hey, you're in this situation, 2034, the first year, you're going to be funding essentially 50% and you're totally fine. You've met your goal. 50% is not funded by you because you've decided 50% down here, percent cost you plan to cover. This gets a little tricky though. Obviously, it looks like $100 is not going to cover us for somebody that's 5, has basically 13 years. We're way short. So the shortfall, obviously, as you guys can see here, we're a little short. So how do we actually make up for that difference? This is where you plug and play until you get a number. So let's say 250. Okay, well, that was a pretty good estimate. And you can see based on your current savings, you'll cover 100% of the amount you plan to cover or whatever you want. Let's say I'm going to put 175 just for ease of numbers here. So if I did put 175, as you see here, the estimated total cost is 180. The amount you plan to cover is 90,000 based on all these factors over here and inputs. So amount needed to meet your savings goal based on your current savings of 175 per month into a low cost index fund or ETF within a 529 specifically. Now we're getting to an actual number. So here we see 67, we based on these numbers and everything, we'd hit about 67% of our goal. But it says exactly what we need to do to reach the full amount. Your plan needs to cover, save an additional 75. That's where we got to the 250. And that would be your goal. So now going forward, you're going to budget and you're going to figure out, hey, how can I get $250 a month into this 529 account so that I can cover 50% of a 4-year public in-state tuition for my future, my daughter or my son going forward. And we can back into this number very easy. So it's not necessarily hard, but it takes some thinking and it takes some thought because there's a lot of inputs here that are going to change for a lot of people. This one being specific percent cost that you plan to cover is going to be a big question mark. A lot of people aren't going to come to some grand conclusion, and things can change as well without time. So like if you are currently saving and you're like, hey, I want to change this, we would just change these inputs. Let's say your child turned 8, but you already had like $8,000 sitting there or something like that. And then you decided to change it to 75% versus 50. We can just update these allocations essentially, and everything is going to change for us. Let's say we stay at 8%. And now we realize, okay, 250 is not getting this there quite, but it's pretty close. And we need to add an additional 120 per month. So we would have what, 370, if I did math correct. Yep. And then, so that's the updated number for you. So it's a plug and play, but it's very good to do this. And you can get your full report by hitting this download feature right here, and you can save it, keep it for your records, all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend parents to use this for your child for Vanguard. I'm going to try to post this for you guys in the Wealth Squad under Wealth Squad University, or maybe chat, whatever. I'll tag everybody. So, okay. So that's a really good chart for your kid for the six-step process. Okay. So this other piece, I'm going to open up another one. So a compound interest calculator. So that was specifically geared to college. You're going to have other goals out there, obviously, as we talked about, and they don't all have calculators for those. But typically what I use to do this would be a simple compound interest calculator. So I go to investor.gov. This is like the official SEC, but you can probably use whatever. I also have one on my my phone, which is a really convenient one to use for compound interest, which is awesome when I'm quick, on the go, and I'm trying to figure out something in my head. I can use that as well. So there's an app. I think it's just called Compound Interest. If you guys have an iPhone, it's like a purple and green app you guys can download. That's going to be very helpful for you. So let's walk into this. So let's say we have a goal to early retire. That's our specific goal. Let's say this is the initial investment. This is what we actually put in. Some brokers, have a $0 minimum, essentially nothing. Vanguards of the world have like a 3,000. So that's kind of what the initial investment is, what you actually put in to begin. But that's going to obviously vary. Let's say you open an account, a brokerage account today. So we'll walk through an example. You have $3,000 and you're going to open it through Vanguard, and you open it into VT Sachs specifically. So you put that $3,000 in there, and you're trying to figure out, hey, how long does it take me to get to early retirement? I'm 30 years old. I'm trying to retire at 50 years old. How much on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis do I need to contribute? So your length and time would be 20 years. So 50 minus 30, goal minus current, essentially. Let's leave this monthly contribution blank. Estimated interest rate, that's kind of the 6% or 8% I was referring to earlier. I would say 8%, but obviously you guys would know your returns better. Market average is 10 if you're investing in the S&P specifically, but that's going to vary. I would use a conservative rate like 8. Interest rate variance range, you can, that's up to you what you're going to put there, maybe 2. That's basically the over under. Essentially, I'm going to put 0 there for now. And then compounded frequency. This is going to be on an annual basis or monthly basis, sorry, because you're doing it on a monthly basis. And then we're going to go up here and kind of plug and play. So let's say we have no idea. Let's just throw a number out there. Let's say, what if we put $500 a month to a brokerage for 20 years at 8% interest with a $3,000 initial investment? What is that going to get us? We can calculate in 20 years, you're going to have 309,000. It's going to have a chart showing you how this compound interest works. Compound interest is slow. It's steady. Obviously, as you guys can see in these charts, it goes way up in the later years, essentially. This is going to show you your contributions, this green line, which is showing you the gap between, this is how much essentially this in between is what you're earning on your investments. And obviously, the first couple of years is nothing, right? Very small gap. You can't even see it. And all of a sudden it really separates in these later years. By year 20, you have a future value of 309,000. Your contributions are only 123,000 here. So that means the gains are the total the difference of that, which is huge. And you can show the table as well. And so if you're like, hey, 309,000 isn't enough for me. I think I want to hit 1 million. And a good way to do this, I'm going to pull up an Excel real fast so I can do this calculation for you. I use the 4% rule. So it's fairly common in the industry. I think it's pretty safe to use as a safe withdrawal rate. So the way you figure this out is do, like, let's say 4%, put this 4% in there for you. And then to figure out how much you can withdraw, let's say you got to think about or how much you need, you got to think about what's the actual withdrawal number that you need to have. And when you think about that, it's a very complicated process, but you as long as you have a budget and you know what your spending on a during that time. So you're thinking out to 50 years old. At 50 years old, we are trying to figure out how much we're going to spend on an annual basis. Let's say we come to the conclusion our monthly expenses are $3,500 and we want to times that by 12. Now we're going to figure out at 50 years old, $42,000 per year is what we're going to need. So how do we actually back into our goal amount here? That's the question. So you take the 42,000, divide it by the 0.04, and you're going to get a number of 1,050,000. So this is now our target goal of what we're trying to reach and accomplish here. So now we have what 350,000, I think the number shot out was. So we're in a deficit of the difference, which is about 700,000. And so now we need to figure out how to get to that, how to accomplish this 700,000 and figure out our goal. So we go back to here and we go back up to here and we say, okay, 500 is not doing the trick. Clearly we're way short. Let's plug 1,000 in. Let's see where that gets us. Calculate. That gets us to 603. Remember, this is a 20-year window. So these numbers might look big, and don't let that discourage you whatsoever. Not everybody's going to early retire at 50 years old. So first off, it's okay. Second of all, we can work to side hustles, all these other things to specifically fund a goal like this. You know, I know people making a ton of money with Uber Eats and Uber, Poshmark, giving plasma. There's so many different ways to make that side money, affiliate marketing, that stuff like that. So think of ways to, you know, increase the income to get to this, but let's work back our way up to here. So like maybe 1,500, it might still be short. We're getting closer, about 900,000. We only need to remember over here, 1,050,000. So that's getting us pretty close. So again, we're plugging and playing until we get the right number, which is our goal. That puts us right at our goal. It's 5,000 short, whatever. So in 20 years, you could have $1,050,000 if you were to save simply $1,750 per month at 8% with a 3,000 initial investment. And this would be like for an early retirement in a taxable brokerage account. So you can actually game plan, okay, if I can get 1,750, I can retire at 50 or, you know, at reasonably at 50 years old. And so we can work different, you know, obviously these factors are going to look way different for everybody, but at least you're learning how to do this so that you can game plan for your specific situation. And if anybody ever needs help, obviously reach out to me. I'll get you covered with that. But these are two really good tools to kind of plan. And this is exactly what I do on a monthly basis to figure out how much money should I have in this investment account? How much money should I have in this investment account? And thinking back to step one was the first piece of that was my goals. Our goal is, you know, to pay off the house early was one of our big goals. Like I mentioned earlier, early retire at like 50 was one of our goals. Retire with, you know, a specific amount, a pretty large sum, make sure our daughter's taken care of and any future children that come. We have a lot of different goals, right? And so I work with these processes all the time with myself, with my clients, everything to make sure that I'm set up and to know how much I need to do in here. And if you want to be ultra conservative, you could always change this return rate. You could change that to 6. I mean, to be ultra conservative, all that's going to do is make you contribute more or extend the amount of years or whatever. But like I said, compound interest is crazy in the later years. So the bigger this number gets, this 20, the less you're going to have to contribute regardless. So again, these are really two cool tools that you guys can take away. Remember this 4% rule we kind of discussed. That's important in goal planning as well. Let's go back to the slideshow. And step 6, begin the investment contributions. So setting up, this is actually a more important step than you guys probably think based on this slideshow here. So the biggest thing with this is setting up automatic contributions, because life happens, things happen, and the worst thing in the world is skipping a month, getting out of the habit of contributing, all that kind of stuff. Everything in my household is automated. There's nothing that I manually contribute from an investment perspective. Every single month, my mortgage is automatically taken out. The extra principal I've allocated to that is automatically taken out. Every single retirement goal is automatically taken out. And this is the biggest piece of this. Automation is huge because one, you're contributing on a periodic basis exactly at the same time every month or every 2 weeks. You're not timing the market, so you're not worrying about where the market's at any given point in time. You're just locked in and saying it doesn't matter where the market is, up or down. I'm investing into the same funds every single 2 weeks, and gaining significant, significant. My goals are being basically accounted for there by doing that. So that's a big piece of this is automation. So I highly recommend if anybody is trying to do this manually, it's going to get really confusing because that Monday morning when you're supposed to be contributing, your alarm, you wake up late for your alarm, you're late to work or something like that. And the last thing you're going to be doing is sitting there on Vanguard's app contributing money. It's just not practical, right? So automate those contributions, make it simple on yourself. Make sure it's within your budget so that you don't have to worry about that money coming out each month and that it fits in your budget. So this is a lot of the thing that my course is going to be talking about coming up is the planning aspect and the budgeting of it, because most people think budgeting is totally boring and they're like, budgeting, I can skip that step and get to investing. That's very false. And it's not restrictive. There's a lot of narratives out there about budgeting being restrictive, being a waste of time, being boring. It's not. It's actually fun. And it provides a lot of money that you probably don't know that you have when you get serious about it. So my course is very geared to, one, you're going to probably find money in this process. When you just simply get on a budget, you'll find money that you've been spending that you're like, oh my God, I have an extra $300 I can put to this goal. And you can start to dream out those scenarios of like, wow, $300 to this goal is going to let me early retire here or help my kid go through college at this date, fully funded 100%. And then on top of that, you're not only are you getting more money back, but you're going to probably be investing more because you're more intentional about where that money's going. And so that's what I like to talk about in my budget course. And obviously in my accounts, I talk about all the time. I'm trying to get away from the narrative that budgeting is boring and stuff like that, because this process that we talked about tonight can be very easily doable when you have that budget and you have those automated contributions and all that kind of stuff set up. So I like to, harp on the budget aspect of this, because a lot of people are going to get into this and say, hey, I want to figure out how much I need to invest, but then they're not going to have that money to invest because they don't realize they probably have it. It's just going all over the place. And when you organize that money, it's going to help you further this goal, which is most people's, focal point is the investing. People like the investing side of things, but the budget will get you there. Hence the name Budget to Financial Freedom. So with that being said, guys, that is the end of my slideshow. That ran a little over, but I want to open up to you guys for questions, and I can share obviously anything on my screen. Let me see the chat box. It doesn't look like anything came from the chat. So if you guys are comfortable with shouting out, go ahead. If not, just go ahead and type in the box here for questions.
Are you able to post the website for the Vanguard calculator on Discord, please?
Yes, I'm going to post it in one of the chat rooms. I'll tag everybody so that you guys have that.
Awesome. Thank you, man. And thank you, man. This was very informative. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Drew has a question. So how do I save when I still have a lot of debt to pay off? That's a great question. I can tell you my Budget to Financial Freedom course will hit very hard on this exact question, because that's a common question everyone gets. My thought process on this, and this is going to vary, and I go in depth in it. So it's, a long conversation to have, but in short, the financial industry is going to typically say, if you have debt and you're trying to invest, if you have debts over 6%, go ahead and pay those debts off, because again, look right below this chat box is the 6%. The reason people use 6% is it's a very conservative market average return after fees, after everything. So using that 6%, the financial industry typically uses that as their benchmarks. Any debts over that number, they're typically going to say, pay off the debts because you're getting a fixed rate of return versus a market return that's we don't know. Anything under 6%, they're going to say, invest and pay off debt, but they're not going to tell you how to get there. My thought process is different. So my thought process is, depending on your age, in your current situation on the investment side of things, if you're young, it's probably not going to impact you too much. But if you're, let's say 40, 50, even 60 years old, and you're not taking care of it on the investment side, it's going to be very tough in that position to stop investing, because you're getting closer to that retirement age where you actually need those investments to work for you. Now, if you're younger, on the younger side, I like to think of it a different way. I think a 2-year mark is typically what I say. If you can pause your investing, and this is very controversial, and people are going to, fight me on this. Trust me, I get it on a daily basis. If you can pause your investing entirely and you pay off your debt in 2 years or less, I advise and I highly recommend to pay off that debt. I did it personally, and it's been nothing but awesome for me, because this is what typically happens. And the reason I kind of put you guys, advise on that, right, is when you have that situation, you're paying off debt in 2 years. That means you are extremely focused and you have a plan in place to do that. Typically, when that happens, you pay it off way faster. I can tell you, when we first set out our plan, kind of like what I was doing tonight, this is the exact process I did with my wife on paying off the $76,000 of debt. On top of this, amortization schedules, all that kind of stuff. I figured out we could pay off our debt in a year and a half, $76,000 of debt. When we looked at that, we were like, okay, we're really inspired to do this. A year and a half is not too long. If we've sacrificed in the short term, all that kind of stuff, we ended up paying it in a year because we were focused and we got on a budget and we found extra money. All of this stuff kind of came together and it sped up the process, and that's extremely powerful. So if somebody's very serious about their goal, they're going to pay off this debt fast. Then what happens after that is what's the beautiful part about it is they're going to take that money plus all this extra money they earned, figured out ways to increase their income, all that kind of stuff. They're going to take that plus more and invest that for 30 years. Remember, this is a 1 to 2 year process. Some people can do it in 5 months. It just depends on your debt amount and how much the income is and all that kind of stuff and how you map it out, what you sacrifice. But if you can do it within 2 years, sure, it's going to take it technically from a math perspective on a spreadsheet. It's not going to say it's more favorable, but I can guarantee you, you locked in, loaded, and ready to go is going to help you more in the long run, because you're so focused on that goal that 100% you're going to pay off that debt, and you're going to probably invest more in the long run because you're intentional with where that money's going, which is unbeatable. And you can't put a number or an opportunity cost on this. Somebody can yell at me all day about the math, but there's something about the psyche that if you lock in, you get ready with this, people get serious and they're going to do this really fast. So I'd say that 2 year mark is typically what I do. I would make sure that's very game planned out. Don't just estimate and think, oh, probably 2 years, because the problem is if you are kind of doing that where you're not very, very detailed, I'm talking, this amount right here, this $1,750 per month amount that you have to do towards your debt, for example, then I don't want you guys going 3, 4, or 5 years without investing. That's not the goal. The goal is to get extremely locked in, pay it off really fast, and then go forward. Now, if you do that and you realize my debt's just insurmountable, it's going to be 5 years, 6 years, then in that case, I would be investing, and I would be investing a lot based on your goals to make sure that you're still hitting your goals, but also still be paying off that debt. The worst thing in the world is not investing for a long period of time. That's not my intention here. My intention is to get it gone really fast, get it gone and then invest a ton. But if you can focus in and do that really fast, you'll be fine. If you can't do that, even if you're locked in, I advise you guys to make sure both things are being accounted for in a very detailed manner, but you might have to change the game plan and the timing around. It might have to be 6 years to pay off the debt, or, the first 4 or 5 years, you can't invest as much because you're paying a little more to debt, but you're still investing a lot to make sure that compound interest is starting in your favor going forward. So that's the way I think through things when I get my clients on plans, my one-on-one consultations, or myself when I think through my own stuff. My wife and I had $90,000 in loans. Should we pay off first or invest and pay off? I think that came in during that conversation. I think that was kind of addressed in that situation, Drew, or iPad 3. Let me know if it wasn't, but I think that would cover it there. Scroll, same here, minus the wife part. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Open for questions, guys. Bueller? Anybody? Oh, Drew's got one. Okay. Yeah, if you guys don't feel comfortable talking out loud, that's totally fine. Just put it in the chat box and I'll get to you. Or if you want to talk, that's fine too. Drew, I'm assuming that you're typing that one out right now. So if you are, that's fine. Or you can shout it out. Oh yeah, okay. So I have a TSP with the government. Do you recommend rollover in IRA or leave it put? So that's a good question. So TSP, guys, for anybody that doesn't know, is a thrift savings plan for governmental employees. There's like 6 funds in there, like the I fund, C fund, G fund, F fund, L funds. So it's specific to that. You can only pick on that. The question here about rolling it over in an IRA, if you are currently with the government and you currently have a plan like the TSP, so think for you guys that have 401ks or 403bs, 457s, same situation. If you are currently with that employer, you cannot roll it over into an IRA. Now, if you do, if you're, let's say you move on from the government or you have a new job and you have an old 401k sitting out there, a TSP, I would highly recommend to roll that over into an IRA. So this is the tax implications on that. So you have 2 options. You can either you have 3 options. You can keep it in the old 401k or TSP. You can roll it over into the new TSP or new 401k. I don't think TSP would technically have a new one, but like 401ks, for example, you could roll it into that one. Or third, the question here, you can roll it over into an IRA. So those are your 3 options. I would never keep it in your old TSP or 401k because you just don't want a bunch of 401ks from old jobs sitting around. You want it all to be together. Secondly, I would probably do the first piece I would do here would be putting it into an IRA. And then thirdly, I would put it into a 401k or new TSP or whatever going forward. Now, when you roll it over to an IRA, that's a good question because this actually comes with tax implications. So if you have a traditional 401k or traditional account and you roll it over, it's considered a traditional IRA. Now, if you have a old Roth and you roll it into a Roth, you can move it to a Roth IRA. But it depends if you take it from a traditional 401k to a Roth IRA, therefore a difference in account structure, still retirement accounts, but a traditional to Roth, you will owe taxes on that conversion. So let's say you have $10,000 in your old 401k and it's a traditional 401k and you're rolling it over into a rollover IRA through Vanguard. That rollover IRA is a traditional IRA. Now, if you want to take that rollover and put it into a Roth IRA specifically, at that point, you would pay taxes on that conversion of the 10,000 times your tax rate. Typically, let's say you're 12% tax rate, right? Based on current tax law. So 10,000 times 12 is what you're going to be paying in taxes on that conversion. Then you would be able to move that over. What to do or begin as a new investor after creating a brokerage account? Good question, Marlon. I think the biggest thing is, like we've talked about in this presentation, start with your goals. Figure out, and that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. After creating a brokerage account, most people, like I said in the beginning, start the brokerage account without a goal, and they don't really understand. They know they're investing, but they don't have a target of what they're trying to do. So think back to the presentation. Let's start at step 1. Let's figure out what our goals are. First, once we figure out our goals, we can figure out which accounts align with those goals. Now we can kind of get into more detail, figuring out the date at which we'll need that money, backing into the number like we did through this presentation, to figure out what we're trying to do here. So as you're beginning as a new investor, walk through this presentation a few more times if you're confused, just to make sure that you're in line with everything so that you know where things are going, how much is going where, and then set it and forget it. Do the automated process. Once you figure this out, and for the next couple of years, life's not changing. It's the same thing over and over and over. Just it's part of you. You're paying yourself first every single Friday, or every single 2 Fridays, or every Friday. You pay yourself first in this situation by automating this, and that's how you're going to do big things with this. So I hope that answers that question. Marlon, let me know if you want to. Oh, I'll answer that one in a second. So I'm considering starting a custodial account or custodial Roth for my son. What would you recommend or consider the best option? So it depends the purpose, Eduardo. This is a good question as well. So think back to the purpose. If it's for your son, you're going to be looking at what do you want that money to do for your son is the biggest question you have to ask here. With a Roth IRA, you are giving your son basically a retirement fund. There are stipulations where they can pull at 18 years old a Roth IRA for different reasons and stuff like that. But the goal of a Roth IRA is for retirement. So if you start that for your son, that's awesome. We're going to do that personally. I'll tell you in a second what our goal is with our daughter coming. The Roth IRA is an awesome option if you want to say, hey, I'm going to set your retirement. I'm going to put, let's say, $10,000 in there over the course of your lifetime, and it's going to grow to $1 million. So at 65 years old, without you doing anything, you're set up for retirement. But a custodial account is more so for like an UPMA, so that when they're 18 years old, they can actually receive that money and use it towards like a down payment for a house, a car, typical things like that. Those big purchases, pay off student loans even. And so that would be the difference. I think either one is good. So I'll give you a little more detail into this question based on what we're doing. So we're doing both for our daughter that's coming out here soon. So we have a Roth IRA set. This is what we're going to set up when she's born. So we're going to have 3 different accounts. We're going to do a Roth IRA. We're going to do a UPMA, which is the custodial account you're talking about right here. In the Roth right here. And then thirdly, we're going to be doing the 529. So we're going to have 3 different accounts for. Based on our goals, we figured out that $250 a month in each account is going to make sense besides the Roth. So the custodial UPMA and then the 529 are going to be $250 each. That's going to basically be we walked through this process exactly, and we backed into, instead of 1750 for our goal, we saw 250 was our goal. So that's what we came to a conclusion on. That gets her to about $120,000 in both of those accounts. So $240,000 at 18 years old, not bad. And then thirdly, the Roth IRA is what we can contribute up to her like basically what she earns from a wage perspective. So the government says, the only requirement for an IRA is you have to invest a specific amount or earn over $6,000 to max out, essentially. So when she is young, she'll be working for my business, essentially, is through BudgetDog. We'll pay her a salary, so she'll have a livable, earnable, reasonable wage, and then we'll put that all in her Roth IRA. So that's going to vary from the Roth perspective because she has to have actual income. But the goal is whatever she earns, if it's $10 or $5,000, all of that's going to go to the Roth IRA, so that she has, at 18 years old, she'll have $120,000 in a college fund, $120,000 in a custodial account. And then at retirement, she's going to have depending on how much we put in throughout the time, a pretty large sum of money sitting there already without her doing anything. So that's kind of what we're doing, how we backed into our process. I hope that helps, answers that question a little bit. How does investing from your taxable account and retirement account differ? Do you invest the same or different things for the accounts? Yeah, good question. So basically, when you guys think about accounts specifically, so when it comes to accounts, there are all these different accounts. Ultimately, that's just the tax designation, or not tax designation, how it's going to be treated from a government perspective. Within those accounts, it's all the same for the most part. You're going to be investing in investment products of some sort through an account. So you can pretty much invest in, let's say your retirement account, let's say you have an IRA, you can invest in anything in the market, right? In your taxable brokerage account, you can do the same. You can invest in anything in the market. So you can be technically invested in the same exact account, or two different accounts, but the same exact fund. So let's say you open up like the S&P 500 low cost index fund. You could be technically invested in VFIA or VU. Let's use VU ETF. VU in the taxable brokerage and VU in your IRA, but they'll be treated separately or differently because the retirement, there's taxable benefits. So you're not getting taxed on the growth within that account. Whereas a non-retirement, which is a taxable account, you're going to get taxed on those gains that you have. So it's capital gains tax. And so those accounts have the same investment, but they have different purposes. And therefore the government's going to say, hey, this is going to be a different tax burden on you. So that's why tax planning and working with a CPA is really important also, to figure out what's the best route and what's the best account is from a tax perspective also, because as your income increases, taxes are something very important to pay attention to, along with fees, investment fees. Where do we open an HSA? There's a lot of places. So if you have a company, basically this is the only requirement for an HSA is a high deductible health plan. So if you have a high deductible health plan, you will automatically likely be enrolled through your company. They have to pretty much open an HSA through some sort of bank. If you don't have an HSA currently and you want to open one, I highly recommend First Dollar. And I'm going to put that in the chat right here. First Dollar is a really good platform. I highly recommend for HSAs. And I do have a link. If you guys do want that, just DM me or whatever after this chat, and I'll shoot you that First Dollar link. But their HSAs, bar none. It's called First Dollar. The whole reason behind it is because a lot of HSAs have a cash reserve that you have to have in there before you can invest. The first dollar that goes in can be invested, which is the whole reason behind their name, which is really cool. So like in my wife's HSA, she had like a $2,000 minimum before she could invest. And then on top of that, she was able to invest, but $2,000 is sitting there in cash essentially. So First Dollar would be a great place. You could technically open one at any bank that offers the HSA. It doesn't matter where you open one. It's totally at your discretion, but most companies are going to provide you with one, a standard one through your high deductible health plan anyway, so you won't have to go anywhere for that. All right, guys, so we have like 5 minutes or so left. Shoot out any questions, either chat or call out, whatever you guys need. Appreciate it, Drew. Hope that helped, man. Again, if you guys have questions, ask me DMs or whatever. So you don't have to be connected to a company or wait for open enrollment to start an HSA, correct? So open enrollment, the only thing with open enrollment is you'd have to have the high deductible. But if you have the high deductible, you're totally fine to go start an HSA today. Work with a CPA. I would highly recommend working with a CPA at all times when it comes to this stuff, so that you know that you're planning these things out appropriately based on your situation. But in general, yeah, you can start one whenever. Appreciate it, Carla. Yep. Percent amount to put towards your retirement account. Okay, so that's a good question. I assume that's a question, not a statement. I typically say 15% of your gross annual income. So let's say you make $50,000 combined gross household income. So you and your spouse make $25,000 a piece. That equates to $50,000. $50,000 times 0.15 would be $7,500. And that's how I typically get to my retirement number, and figuring out, hey, I need to probably be putting 7,500 there. If not, if you're like late to the game or you're trying to catch up or something like that, I would simply use this right here, figuring out, hey, we're late. We have, instead of 20 years, we only have 15 years to go. Let's figure out how much we need to contribute to this, and let's see if it works with our budget essentially. So the general rule of thumb is definitely 15%. Some industry professionals say 10. I've heard anywhere from 10 to 20. I've never heard anything below or under or over that. But I think 15% is a really strong base for retirement. And I also think you guys should be investing into retirement before a taxable brokerage account. that can be dangerous to be investing in early retirement funds before your retirement's actually taken care of. I get the argument, who wants to hold their money till 65 or whatever, but the thing is, you're going to be 65 at some point, and if you don't take care of yourself now for your 65-year-old self, you're going to be in a bad position. So yes, definitely pay your retirement account first. That's the best place to start. Early retirement, guys, is a bonus. It is something that is an awesome thing to have, and I think a lot of people can do it if they set themselves up right. But like, it's not just like, hey, everybody can retire at 50 years, 30 years old or whatever. Like, it's a hard thing to do. It's very planned out and calculated. So in order to do that, make sure your 65-year-old self is taken care of. Because the worst thing is, hey, I have a lot of money at 50, but I don't have enough money to live the rest of my life. You live in early retirement for 10 years, then you get 60 and you're like, what? I don't have money. I have to go work, or I have to live off Social Security and bank on the government. And in that situation, it could be detrimental, What was the last account you mentioned for your daughter? Yes. So the custodial was in UTMA, so UTMA. You might hear UGMA, UGMA. That's a custodial account. The 529, yes, that would be the second one. And the Roth IRA would be the third one. So you got it right here. And I often think a hybrid approach is the best, because my wife and I were talking about this, and it's our first kid. So we're 29 years old. So I was like, obviously I know quite a bit about the investing game, but like, this is kind of a you and I conversation we need to have to figure out, what are we trying to achieve here? Thinking back to step one, what are our goals for her? And the more I thought about it, I was like, I was kind of pinpointing like which one should we use versus like, hey, can we use all of them? And then at the end of it, I was like, wait, why don't we just do a bit in each one? Because what if she doesn't go to college? The 529, if we have everything in the 529, well, that's going to be screwed, or we'll have to give that to a future grandchild or something like that. Why don't we put it in UPMA so she can definitely get it, 50% there, 50% to that. And then whatever she makes from an income perspective goes to her retirement, essentially. So we ended up just doing a hybrid approach. I have a post specifically on my Instagram about that, that you guys can look, but it's basically what I've been talking about tonight. All right, guys, it looks like everybody's questions have been answered. If anybody has a final question, I am definitely willing to take it. Just let me know. And then we'll sign off for the night. Going once, going twice. All right. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you for tuning in tonight. This will be saved in Wealth Squad University. I will upload the 2 links to Wealth Squad University or the chat or something like that as well, and tag everybody in that so that you guys have that. And then obviously my account is BudgetDog on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok now, scary enough. And then Facebook. So if you guys want to connect with me there, I'm always open in the DMs. You guys can hit me up in the DMs and I'll answer your question. I typically will voice message you so that you guys get a really good response. And lastly, remember my course is coming out June 10th. So be ready for that. Be on the lookout. I think my next presentation is in 2 weeks on the 25th, Monday, the 25th. So I will see you guys then.